caregiving doesn't just change your schedule. It actually changes who you are. And one day you sort of wake up and you realize that you don't even really recognize yourself anymore. Caregiving causes us to become so consumed with daily chores, schedules, juggling our own personal lives, and trying to keep up with the one that we are caring for, that suddenly we become worn down. We lose energy. We lose who we are as a worker, who we are as a parent, who we are as a spouse. It really is all encompassing. Many people look at caregiving and just think that it's the stress over the loss of time. But the truth is that over time, gradually, we start to lose ourself. We lose our energy. We lose our identity as the worker that we were for our employer. Relationships with our coworkers. We lose who we are as a parent because we're consumed with our loved ones' needs. We lose who we are in our relationship with our spouse because our energy is so depleted and our patience is so shot. It's no surprise that we really don't recognize ourselves after a while. And this loss and this change brings about a sense of guilt in missing who we used to be and the life that we used to have before it was consumed in caregiving. My name is Amy, and I am a coach for family caregivers. I was a caregiver for myself. I was a caregiver myself for my father, who had lung cancer, and my mother, who had dementia. The dementia got worse as my father's condition got worse, and she became more stressed about it. Finally, after my father's passing, she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So I cared for my father in the home while caring for my mother. And then after his passing and a fateful fall by my mother, I cared for her through assisted living in a facility. So I understand. I've been there. That loss of identity is real. And it can take quite a while to sort of dig yourself out of it and figure out who you are and who you want to be as you take on this caregiver journey. And if you're interested in learning how you can hang on to your identity and still go through this caregiver journey, keep on listening, because I'm here to help and support you. If you're caring for your aging parent, probably the quickest loss in identity as you care more for them, especially if they have dementia, is that role reversal, that switch from you being the child and them being the parent. Suddenly you're the one that's sort of setting parameters for things. You're watching medications and telling them when to take it and when not to take it, and doing the reminding and making lists of things to sort of keep them honed in and focused. They begin to ask you for advice. They begin to not accept your advice, right? The true equalizer to the teenager we used to be. We can chuckle about it, but in the midst of it, it's actually very frustrating because all sorts of things come up from that time in our childhood. And then we look at our parent and we think to ourselves, how can you be acting like this? You know, you're acting like a child. We might even say that out loud. You're acting like a child. And of course, they're never, ever going to accept that, even though we know that it's kind of true. That shift in identity can be confusing and it can be difficult. And it can leave us wondering and questioning ourselves if we're doing the right thing. Are we caring in the right way? And the answer is yes. You're starting to take on the reins of decision making that they're not able to do in the current situation that they are in. Coming to terms with that, grappling with that shift from the child role to the more of a parent role can be difficult. But if you accept that you're doing it with a caregiver's heart for their good, then it can be acceptable, right? Understandable. And while you've taken on this caregiver role, it's an addition to what you are normally doing, right? It's an addition. So there's no surprise in the fact that you might be pulling back from the things that you do in your workplace. You might become a bit more isolated, a bit less social with your coworkers, because what you're actually doing is you're conserving energy, right? You sort of have two jobs going on here, the one you get paid for and the one that you feel obligated to do. You might even be questioning whether you can still do your job at work well. You're feeling so heavy in obligation, in responsibility, that you're tired a lot. Your brain has a lot of lists going on in there of things to do, things you want to remember. It's hard enough for us to keep up with our own schedules, our own appointments, our own responsibilities. But as a caregiver, you have just taken on all of those things for your loved one. You're managing their schedule, their responsibilities, their appointments, along with your own. You're feeling distracted, right? And you're doubting yourself and your capabilities at work. You might not think that you're a reliable employee at this point. Not that you don't show up for work, although you might be taking off from work to take care of your loved one. You might feel disconnected in what's happening day to day because you're basically in survival skill. You're just sort of keeping your head down, and you're not really quite the employee that you used to be. You're trying to manage it all. And so I want to let you know that pulling back in the workplace is not something wrong. It is sort of protecting yourself, isolating yourself a little bit, not because it's a character flaw, but because you're doing what you need to do, but not expending all of that extra energy in the social aspects. And that's okay, right? You're there, you get the job done, you're maintaining your job, the things that are crucial that you need to take care of without overextending yourself socially or taking on other side responsibilities around your job. That's okay at this point. You have another responsibility on the side outside of the workplace. And let's face it, another thing that we're also sort of conserving are our emotions. We can be so emotionally invested in the things that are happening with our loved one that we might be holding them inside so that we don't upset our loved one, we don't shock our loved one, we don't let our loved one down. But holding all of that in and dealing with all of that emotion can also affect our emotional support at home with our spouse, we might feel so loaded down, so sad in some ways, that we don't have any emotions left for intimacy. And our spouse might not completely understand that. They see and perceive you still going through the daily things that it seems like you've always done. And, oh yeah, you run and you do these other things too. But do they really understand how heavy this whole experience is for you? You know, I remember thinking as I became more and more involved with my parents, they lived 30 minutes away from me, and I would drive there after work, deal with whatever the latest crisis was with them. Sometimes I would stay overnight. Sometimes I would come home in the wee hours of the morning. Sometimes I would just, drive home. And my husband never truly understood how draining it was for me. He could see that I was tired, but he never truly understood the emotional drain. And then that in itself, brings up some guilt with not being there for him, not doing the things around the house that I felt I should be doing. And it brought up a lot of locking of horns, that I might be away for 2 or 3 days at a stretch and come home and find the house in a state of chaos and think, really? You couldn't just do the dishes? I have dealt with this litany of things, all of these emotional crises, and you couldn't do the dishes. It can be a real strain on your relationship. And that's a loss. We talk about losing our identity. That's a feeling of grief adds to the sadness as you are watching your loved one deteriorate. Sometimes it might feel like your relationship with your spouse is deteriorating. And it's very important to have open communication about this. Otherwise, it's just one more thing that you're keeping inside, one more thing that is weighing heavy on you. You can't keep it all down all the time, because suddenly you'll burst. And in my situation, my husband got a lot of the explosions. Shouldn't be a surprise. He was the closest to me, right? My best friend. I should be able to tell him exactly what I'm thinking. And sometimes I did, usually in anger. When in hindsight, I probably should have told him exactly what I was thinking as I was going through the emotions of watching my mother deteriorate, watching us sell the house, watching us move her to assisted living, watching her world get smaller while I was still trying to make it cheery for her. Just, trying to say it's okay, when inside it wasn't okay, but I wasn't sharing that. And along with that role of your spouse, there's the parenting. You feel like you're failing at both ends. Feel like you're not all there for your loved one. You're not all there for your family. Maybe you're not doing the sporting events like you normally do. Maybe you're not there to be home at night to help with homework or to transport them somewhere. Or maybe you are, and you are so in the list of checking off the things that you have to do that you're physically present, but you're not mentally and emotionally present for your own children. and that antagonism can kind of start up. And they tell you that they forgot that you need to sign something for the next day for school. I don't know, a field trip. Or you need to run to the store and you got to pick up something that they're going to need for practice. Or that it's going to be a late night at drama practice rehearsal. And then you're exasperated because you hadn't figured that into the schedule that you have so tightly created between the responsibilities for your loved one that you're caregiving for, your own responsibilities at work, and now these family responsibilities. And suddenly you don't feel very joyful as a parent. Those day-to-day things are just becoming one more thing to do. And you've lost any kind of happiness or playfulness. It's all just a chore. And you find yourself exasperated when your kids tell you one more thing that needs to be done. I want you to know that you're parenting under a pressure that most people don't even see. Even those that are living with you, they don't necessarily see the pressure that you're feeling. You might be dealing with your own parents and all the emotions that come with watching them decline. That's heavy in itself. Talk about it with your spouse. Include your children in the conversation in the best way that you know how, so that they understand where you are, why you're not always there, and why grandma or grandpa don't really seem the same, why they're declining. That's a life lesson, and you can teach them that, so that they in the future have the compassion to understand, and they in the present can have the gift of compassion to understand where you are, while you're giving your gift of compassion to your parents. It is very true that caregiving does reshape us. That's true. We're not going to snap back to who we were before we were caregiving. And that's okay, because there's a lot of lessons. But what caregiving doesn't do is it doesn't erase your self-worth. You're questioning yourself a lot now. You want to be that same person you were before caregiving to your spouse, to your children, to your employer. Well, you added one more brick to the pile. Something has to give. And you're managing and you're handling it. And it should be no surprise that things have to look different while you're going through this. So you're not worthless. You're probably worth more because you're gaining more skills. It's not a failure. You're certainly not broken. But you do deserve some space for yourself. You do deserve some compassion for yourself and compassion from others, as long as they understand, right? Be open and be explaining. And you do deserve recognition for what you are doing. It's not just a little extra thing. People make full-time careers out of caregiving. That's what you've taken on. And you might be learning from the beginning. And you are learning. It is a learning process. I don't have to tell you that things change overnight. One day, they're doing fine, and the next day, you're sitting in the emergency room wondering, how did that just happen? And now how are we going to have to deal with this? A constant learning curve. So I want you to know that I am just one more support for you. So please check out my other videos, especially if you are in crisis mode. Check out my video that talks about how to handle the 3 different types of crises in caregiving. And if you're just trying to get a handle on what it's like to be caregiving over 50, and you're just wondering if you're doing it right, check out my video that talks about self-doubt. I give you 3 guiding questions to make sure you're running down the rails in the right way. All right, my friends, nobody should have to walk this journey alone. Please know that I'm here for you in my videos, but I'm also here for you in person. If you are looking for support right now, go down into the show notes and click free support session, and you and I can chat live. We can do it by phone, we can do it by Zoom, and to see one another. I would love to hear your story. Nobody should walk this journey alone.